You in the office, baby. Going up.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Slice Fight Network. Today we're here with Coach Joel Deere. He is North Pointe wrestling coach coming up this season, and we're going to get a little backstory on him, how he got to Mississippi, became wrestling coach, got involved with it, and then we're going to give you some preseason snapshots, some things we're looking forward to, some events, wrestlers to look out for. How we doing today, Joe?
Man, I'm doing well, and I'm excited to be here. I feel like this has been a long time in the making. I've known you for a couple years, and I've been dying to be on your podcast, dude. So thank you so much for having me.
Yep.
And I'm excited to talk about my favorite sport, dude.
All right, man. Well, here we go. So, like I said, fans know your name, Joel Deere. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I come from Iowa. That's born and raised. I wrestled there from grade school, junior high, high school. I got a college wrestling scholarship at Central Baptist. Shout out to Ken Profit. Spent 3 years there. Decided it was time to return to Iowa. Transferred to Waldorf University where I graduated. Then I worked in Columbus, Ohio for a little bit. Decided to go back to school. Went to Arkansas State. Then from there, I decided to pursue a PhD. So I'm at the University of Mississippi currently. Hotty toddy. Go Rebs. And coincidentally, the first year of my PhD program was the first year wrestling started in Mississippi. And so at the time, Oxford didn't have a program, but they had Oxford Wrestling Club started by Brandon Beckerdite. I linked up with him, and I started getting to work with Oxford Wrestling Club. That's where I got to meet Conrad Ernst, and that's where I met Matt Shaner, who's running the youth program over there. And as you know, Conrad's the head coach at Oxford. And then I also met people like Pat Towery, and that's how I got linked up with South Pontotoc. Coached there for 2 seasons.
Shout out South Pontotoc.
Hey, represent. And so then it's kind of just progressed from there. Currently, I'm the assistant coach at North Pointe Christian School, as well as the club coach at 3C in Olive Branch, Mississippi.
Okay. Now, I've seen you in here, with Premier Wrestling, doing some work, working with the guys and stuff. Talk to us about some of the wrestlers that, are coming up under you.
Oh, man. First of all, I just want to say I love my wrestlers. Anyone who trains under me, they're my boys. And it's been such a blessing to have this opportunity to coach these young men and share the sport that I love. And so I guess I'm just going to go in sequential order. I started off at South Pontotoc. That's when I got my coaching chops going. And my first standout athletes were, Reed Jones and Braden Holly, Grayson Holly, Shaw Pruitt. Those guys were my South Pontotoc boys, and that's who I really started with. And they're a group of killers, and I expect them to do very well this season. And then I linked up with Steve Kiesler with Tanglefoot Wrestling Club. And there I coached, it's quite the list. I got Luke Hale, Carson Hale, I had Mike Wilbanks, Trip Nowlin, Brandon Myhan, and a handful of other wrestlers from that area, from this Pontotoc, Lee County area. And so those kids from North Pontotoc, South Pontotoc, Saltillo, they've shown that they have the ability to become good wrestlers, and they have definitely proven within the state and outside the state that they can hang with just about anybody. I'm very proud of the kids I've coached, and they definitely have a bright future. And then later on, we'll talk about the current kids I'm coaching up in DeSoto County.
All right, man. So we got a couple of events coming up to start the season. Is there anything in particular? I know, November 14th is the Tupelo, right? Is that when it opens up?
Well, there's a couple big duels and big tournaments in November. I know North Pontotoc, I believe, is having another tournament that's going to have a lot of North teams. Tupelo's hosting their own tournament. Again, a lot of North teams will show out and represent, which is good. It's good to see the competition you're going to have throughout the year and see them consistently, just kind of see where the bar is. So, like, if you see a guy first of the year, maybe you don't do so hot, you can go back to the drawing board, come up with a new game plan, see him at another duel, see him at another tournament, because, it's really all about leading up to that North half state. And so having these competitions, and especially these repeated competitions, I mean, it definitely gets you situated for when it matters, and that's to qualify for that state tournament.
And that's something I was curious about asking. It's like, all right, now that, Mississippi's had wrestling for a couple years now, and you've seen it, since its, inception, like how would you see going into the preseason, some of the work that's being put in, whether it be from individual athletes or the teams, like how does that compare, to coming from somewhere like Iowa where they've had wrestling for a long time, and that's something that just kids do growing up. Like what's the difference in the preparation that you've seen so far, and improvements that you've seen from year to year?
Yeah, man, I tell you what, I'll start with my biggest frustration is that a lot of wrestlers from like the Midwest, they've developed skills and habits from when they were in elementary school. And so by the time they reach high school, there's a lot of things you don't need to teach them, like the discipline, the regiment, the basic movements, like that's already imprinted on these athletes by the time they reach high school. And so now we have these high school age kids that are starting wrestling for the first time. They're really excited and they're enthusiastic and they want to start with like some really complicated advanced moves or what I would say like level 3, level 4 stuff when we're still on level 1 stuff, But with that said, the kids that have stuck with it since its inception in this state and who have continuously trained and put in the work, I mean, shoot, like I said, my club kids, the results speak for themselves. I mean, we've traveled from Alabama to Georgia to Tennessee, and, they come home with golds. And so if I can take kids and get 5 months, 6 months to a year with them, and then they're already beating state qualifiers and state placers from Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, I mean, the sky's the limit here. I mean, Mississippi, the one thing they do have going for them is they really do have athletes, and they do have some just natural-born fighters. And so this sport is definitely, there's fertile ground for this sport in this state, for sure.
Absolutely, man. And that's one of the things that, a couple of names, like I said, I know, Trip Nolan and Brandon Stacks, those are two names that really stand out to me because I've seen them, putting in the work and, also traveling with you to these off-season tournaments and stuff. Now, when you talk about like those athletes, right, that have like excelled in the rapid amount of time, it's like, now what is like the ceiling that you could see, for athletes like that, where it's like you kind of got a late start, but you do have a lot of natural talent and you have the work ethic and discipline to go along with that? Like, could they still hit that same achievement as far as, D1 national champion, All-American? Or is that something where it's like, you still may need a few more years of development prior to getting to that stage?
I'm giggling a little bit because I'm just going to say the most corny thing I could possibly say right now, and that's, you reach for the stars no matter what. You always set that expectation high. So even when you fall short, you're still going to end up in a pretty good outcome. And so by that I mean, I think it's perfectly natural and harmless for an athlete who's just starting like their 7th, 8th, 9th, even their 10th grade year to say, I'm going to win a state title, I'm going to win a national title, I'm going to go get a D1 scholarship. Hey, if that's the goal you set out, go for it. And then get as close to that goal as possible. I mean, this story is probably not going to mean to casual wrestling fans, but there was this kid named Andrew Sparks out of California. He started wrestling his 9th grade year, won a state title his senior year, beating 2 nationally ranked kids, and got a full ride to Minnesota. And so, I mean, that kid started in 9th grade, won a state title in one of the best wrestling states in the country, and then got a Division I scholarship. I mean, it's not impossible, to say the least. But, if anything, we've learned from at least the South that they're churning out college recruits. I mean, let me just take a pause and say what David Sutherland and Coach Snow at Ocean Springs are doing. I mean, like I said, they've already sent 6 to 9 kids to college. And so, and to my knowledge, they're being competitive in their own respective rooms. And so to do that in just this amount of time is really impressive. And it shows that, I've never even seen a Van Cleve practice, and I know he's doing good stuff because you don't produce that quality without doing the things you need to do in the room.
Right.
And I think really what it comes down to is that you need the drive to want to do it, which, like I said, the kids that stuck with me, who consistently have trained with me, they've proven to me that they've bought into this idea and this vision. And then more so, you just need to have the culture. And that's something, if we can just digress for a second and just kind of talk about a wrestling culture, that's what I've noticed is the hardest thing to stick so far in the state of Mississippi, is that this sport is just, it's different. It requires a different type of commitment, a different kind of physicality, a different kind of headspace that other sports just don't demand as much, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to I wanted to touch on as you was talking about it. Was you said something, buying into the program, right? Talk to us about that.
Well, every time I'm with a new group of kids, or even after my veterans, my returners, I have to remind them constantly, like, you just have to trust this process, have faith in me that I'm going to put them through a process that has proven success. And so when I started coaching, I thought, like, how am I going to be coached? What kind of coach do I want to be? How am I going to even teach these kids wrestling? And then I realized, well, hey, I'm from a really good high school program. We were 10th in the nation my senior year. They've won numerous individual and team titles. And, shout out to Coach Dan Knight of Bettendorf High School. He's still coaching state champions. And so I figured, why not just take that blueprint? The blueprint's already made. And so I'm applying that. And so, unfortunately, from the outside looking in, that blueprint is intense. It's high-intensity training, a hot room, hard work, aggression. I mean, and it's something that I understand that people who are accustomed to, say, like baseball or soccer just aren't used to.
Yeah.
I mean, they see someone yelling and making them run sprints and saying, stay on them, high pressure, high pace, aggression. That's intimidating to a lot of folks. And it's understandable because, like I said, wrestling is just a couple years old here. But it's just a proven formula that breeds success, and it originates from Iowa City, Iowa, under Dan Gable. I mean, it's called an Iowa style, this high intensity, high pace, high aggression, high offense. And this is just a fun fact I want to talk about. If you want to see every successful high school program and collegiate program, you can trace it back to Dan Gable in Iowa City from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so what's beautiful is that it's happening here in Mississippi as well. Like, you can see it from California to Ohio to the East Coast. I'm doing my own thing with my Iowa heritage and all that stuff. But Forrest Marks, shout out to French Camp. He's from Northeast High School, just 40 minutes north of my hometown, and he's doing the same thing down there. So it's cool that we have this Midwestern influence spreading all across the country, especially in a place here that's just getting wrestling. And speaking of the Midwest, Conrad Ernst, Wisconsin boy. I mean, state runner-up there, D3 All-American. I mean, he's doing that at Oxford, and he's doing great things at Oxford. And it's because we're taking that culture, that blueprint of success, and applying it here. And you can tell the teams that have that blueprint and the teams that don't.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's something that, coming from, fighting MMA, that resonates a lot, because a lot of times, man, that coach that, he can really hard. He just feels like, man, like I can't do anything right, like he's just steadily on me, just driving me, and but that right there is what produces the winners.
Yeah.
It's like if you can develop that thick skin, and just, hey, like, he's not doing this because he's belittling me. He's doing this because he knows there's more that I can offer. He's trying to bring the best out of me, and that's something that I can relate to as far as that, that intensity in the training, and just wrestling in itself. It's a hard sport. Like, you're trying to physically grab someone, put them on the ground, and hold them there. Right. It's like, how many people just willingly let you do that on a daily basis? You know what I mean? Like, that's a natural instinct to fight back. So it's not that easy. And so if you want to be great at it, then there's a lot of work that comes along with that.
I mean, yeah, it's literally simulated combat, and so you have that fight or flight instinct from the moment that first whistle blows. You know what I'm saying? And what's interesting is, or at least not interesting, but what's unfortunate is that, let's say if I'm running a practice and a parent walks in and just sees a snapshot of that singular moment, they might have a certain opinion on what they're seeing, and they might not have a good opinion on what they're seeing. But the fact of the matter is I always try and create a culture of transparency within my programs that I work with, and I always explain why I'm doing it, and I try and present it in a way to where we have a mutual understanding of why we're doing what we're doing. And the most important thing is, I always tell my athletes, I will never make you do something, I'll never treat you in a way that I haven't experienced myself.
Right.
And like I said, I'm a PhD candidate, I've no criminal record, come from a good wrestling stock. I mean, I think I turned out all right. And so, and if anything, I think a lot of the experiences that I went through my wrestling career has got me to this point. And frankly, heck, I was just giving a speech last night to my wrestlers where the skills that I have acquired have taken me very far in life. This mental resiliency, this toughness, this confidence that this process gives you. You know, I would have probably gone to a 4-year school if it wasn't for wrestling, and more importantly, I wouldn't have graduated. You know, wrestling provided me a community, it provided me discipline, and, you know, guardrails to operate through, and so.
And accountability.
Yes,
right. Your teammates, they're going to
100%.
hold you accountable. You know, like if you're slacking off, it's like, all right, man. You know, it ain't just the coach you got to worry about. You know, and that's that culture, right?
Exactly.
That's the culture. You want everybody buying in, and everybody's coming in working hard. And it's like, hey, if this guy ain't working hard, the coach don't have to be the one that tells him. I'm gonna tell him.
Which, oh man, sorry, I got the biggest smile because the group I'm working with now, you know, it's cool because I'm getting this habit of, again, doing what how my high school coach did. At the start of practice, we have a little meeting, like, this is what we're going to do today, this is why we're doing it, all right, comments, questions, let's get to work, and at the end, same thing, like, how are we feeling, this is why we did what we did, maybe try and get a little Coach Carter speech thrown in there.
Yeah.
But what I like about this group, and I saw it in this area too, don't get me wrong, but what's special so far in this new group that I'm working with is that I can see fire in their eyes. They are so hungry, and here I had to beg kids to be leaders. Like, hey man, hold your teammates accountable, warm them up for me, da 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 da. I didn't even have to tell anybody up there. I got 3-4 kids right now that are born leaders who are leading this team that are, and I tell you what, that in-house accountability, it's one thing for a coach to say something, but if you got your teammates
Right.
pushing each other, holding each other accountable, positive self-talk, I mean, that's special, dude.
Yeah, that is huge. And man, and just kind of backing up a little bit, you know, on, you know, the way that a coach will coach people. Like you said, it's basically, you know, simulated combat, right?
Yeah.
And so, like I said, as a coach myself, you know, when it comes to fighting, like, I'm hard on them out of safety. Like, if you go out there like unprepared,
Oh yeah, dude.
you know, like, you could get hurt. And so it's like, you need to understand, like, when we step out there, like, you gotta go. Like, if you're waiting around, you're already losing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if you're just being reactionary and you don't understand and you don't have the conditioning and the gas tank to be the one that's pushing the pace,
Yeah.
it's like, it can get dangerous, you know? Like, it can get dangerous.
Dude, and again, I'm just thinking back to last night's practice. You know, like I said, I'm always on my kids about intensity, constant pressure, don't give them room to breathe. And then, I know this sounds so intense, but, you know, no mercy, that cliche. But first and foremost, one of my favorite things I say is wrestling's just a metaphor for life, which I'm going to circle back to that in a second, just to stay in the realm of wrestling in a literal sense. You know, when you go out in that ring alone in front of all your family and friends and, you know, your community, and you shake hands and that whistle blows, like, your opponent's not going to take it easy on you. You know, they're not going to give you that win. And so, and also, you know, I've wrestled some mean dudes in my life too.
Yeah.
And, you know, I couldn't just be like, yo, dude, chill. Like, no, if anything, made them more mad.
Right.
You know? And so you got to kind of get in that mentality of where it's like, I got to wrestle hard, and you know, in the practice room, like, hey, we're friends before and after practice, but when coach says go, hey, we're
Gotta
wrestlers
go.
right now.
Yep,
You
gotta
know?
go.
We got to go. We got to do this. And to extrapolate that beyond the literal wrestling, I mean, that's just life. I mean, I didn't appreciate that when I was a teenager or a college student, but as an adult, you know, life can be real cruel, dude.
Sure.
And, you know, sometimes it's not going to be easy. And so you have to, it's an unfortunate reality that life isn't easy, but I think it's not a bad thing to kind of get kids used to this idea that I need to be resilient because life's going to come at me hard and fast, just like my opponent when that whistle blows.
Yeah.
And so those are kind of things that I'm trying to sprinkle in through this coaching process.
Yeah, being able to keep your focus on the goal through the struggle.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, don't let the struggle just take you completely out of your element,
Yeah.
take you out of the fight, you know, altogether. Like, yeah, struggle's just a part of it. You got to learn how to keep walking through that struggle and get to where you want to go, right?
Oh, for sure, dude. I mean, we're starting to get to that point where Mississippi kids are starting to, like, do real weight cuts, especially my club kids. When we travel around, they definitely have had to cut it. I think at most was 9 to 12 pounds, which that's a rough cut. But, you know, when I was in college, I would cut like 15 pounds to get down to a weight class. And you want to talk about a process that requires mental toughness. like not eating or drinking and still having to go to workouts and just trying to stay sane. And you kind of again you develop this resiliency to where it's just like, I just need to make it to that next minute. I need to make it to that next hour. I need to make it to that next day. I'm every second closer to my goal, making that weight. And I'm bringing that story up because I've been in parts of my life where I've been down bad, and it's like, well, I just got to make it to the next day.
Yeah.
I just got to make it to that next hour, or even like I said, that next minute.
Yeah.
That alone has got me through some rough times. Like, just get to that next minute, man.
Yeah.
And like I said, wrestling instilled that mentality in me, and it's probably saved my life a couple of times, for
That's
sure.
right, man. Like I said, I firmly believe mental toughness is one of the things in life that'll take you the furthest.
Mm-hmm.
If you can block out the noise, not get in your feelings and not turn yourself into the victim.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like I just had a conversation with somebody about this the other day. Like, man, like the poor little old me stuff. It's like, nobody's coming to save you, man.
Right.
Like, you got to save yourself, right? And that's where, going through, starting with, just a hard practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's just the start. And then now you have a hard preseason, getting prepared for the season. Now you go in and you push hard through the season. Now all that those are mental reps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then back to the weight cut thing on that, right? In wrestling they do the 2-day tournaments. You gotta make weight both days. It's one thing making weight, that day, and you got to make the weight the day that you wrestle, right? So it's like, in fighting, you make the weight the day before, and then you get to rehydrate and everything. And you see some of these guys, they'll weigh 185, but whenever they step in on fight night, they're 220. It's like, well, it ain't like that in wrestling. You got to make that weight that morning, and then you go wrestle. Then you got to make weight again the next morning if it's a 2-day tournament.
Which, sorry, we're starting to uncork the bottle. I'm getting nice and loose. I'm ready to start talking, dude. Now, what's kind of cool living in the future, I haven't seen it in season yet, but these off-season tournaments, I've seen this consistently with remote weigh-ins, which I think that's dope. I like that a kid can cut the weight. Let's say the tournament's on a Saturday. They can do a remote weigh-in on a Friday, and then they can go to bed with a full belly and a hydrated system. And then they can show up and wrestle that next day. Because it still accomplishes the goal of having a weight class. We don't want kids, having these weight advantages. But it also, dude, it sucks waking up at, a Saturday morning, still dehydrated, starving, going to a tournament, and then only having 2 hours to try and bounce back and recover and wrestle at peak performance. Like, that's incredibly difficult, So, and then there's a huge debate in the wrestling community about applying, again, the remote weigh-ins or what's called mat side weigh-ins, which there's pros and cons. I admire both sides of the argument. I still don't know where I fall on that, but I'm also starting to warm up, especially in Mississippi, and this is to all coaches. We're so young. There's no sense in cutting weight. There's no sense in taking a first-year wrestler and like, okay, you got to lose 4 or 5 pounds. That is madness. Like, just, especially with these kids, and this is something I've had to kind of come to grips with, is a lot of this is just something kids are going to do. This is a hobby.
Right.
This is, wrestling. Let me give this a try. And so it'd be insane for me to be like, oh yeah, cool. Yeah, this is a sport for you to try. Now lose 6 pounds by Friday. Okay, like don't eat lunch for 3 days. Like that would be which that's not a good way to cut weight. Which we'll come back to that. But to ask a kid to do that who's never been exposed to that sport before is crazy.
Right.
But yeah, man.
All right, so let's start talking about some of this, the season that we got coming up. All right, some of the teams in the North that we're fairly familiar with. I've covered several of these teams right here: Saltillo, Tupelo, DeSoto Central, North Pontotoc, South Pontotoc, French Camp. Give us some of your thoughts on some of these teams from the North coming into this season.
So I want to preface this by saying, I just want to throw in just how quickly this sport is growing. So I'm so sorry to pump the brakes. I want to kind of just talk about the evolution of the sport in wrestling.
Okay. Yeah,
because so when I started my college career, Arkansas wrestling had only been around for about 4 years. All right, and so I got to see Arkansas kind of go through the same experience that Mississippi's going through right now. But the main difference is that, and hey, this is amazing that Arkansas had this opportunity and they had these people, but they had generous donors who wrote schools blank checks to kind of get it off the ground. And then this this gentleman, Greg Hatcher, of the Hatcher Agency. Shout out to him. I mean, like I said, he wrote checks to every school that wanted to start a program. He wrote checks to colleges that wanted to start a program. And I mean, Arkansas is a Division I wrestling program ranked in the top 25 before Georgia or Florida has a Division I program. And they've had wrestling since like the 60s.
Dang.
And so, I mean, what Arkansas has accomplished is insane. But they've also had a guy who had a vision and had the capital to do it.
Right.
Mississippi, we have the enthusiasm, we have the vision, but you know it's hard to raise money. You know, we don't have those deep bank accounts, and a lot of schools are skeptical and hesitant to produce that money. But even so, I think a lot of athletic directors have seen the passion and have been eventually bought on to this argument that we've presented of why wrestling is so important. And in just a short amount of time, we've gone from 9 teams in the initial year, and I think we're close to 30. I think 29-ish. 30 if you're going to include North Pointe, but we're going to come back to North Pointe. And so that's huge growth. And so I want to just give a shout out to the new teams in the North. If I forget any of them, I'm sorry, but I know we got Olive Branch, I know we got Corinth, Hernando, you know, those 3 right away. I know we got North Pointe. And so those 4.
New Albany.
New Albany around
Right
these
here.
parts represent, go
Yep.
Dogs.
I think Ripley as well.
They're on the horizon. Pontotoc City's got a team this year.
That's right.
So, I
Pontotoc City
mean,
first year.
how awesome, you know, and it's just going to keep growing. I mean, I know, especially in DeSoto County, last I heard, the superintendent there said within the next year or 2 that all schools are going to have wrestling. So if you're a DeSoto County school, if you don't have wrestling yet, you're going to have it soon. And so, I mean,
And I'm pretty sure DeSoto County is like one of the largest, if not the largest
oh,
county
yes.
in the state of
Yes,
Mississippi.
yes. And
I mean,
so
that's huge,
It
right?
is-
Like
it is.
getting those teams bought in, like that's huge.
And so it's just, I mean, obviously, I want things to happen right now. I don't have the patience. I want everything now. You know, I want
Yeah.
this to be Iowa tomorrow. But
yeah,
I have to learn that this is a marathon, not a sprint. But again, I just wanted to comment that the work that the foundation's putting in, Sutherland, Truckner, Fox, Shaner. I mean, you guys are you're doing God's work. I mean, you know, we really wouldn't have wrestling without you guys. And so, among other coaches, and among, you know, the ADs, the administration, all that. So, you know, just thank you guys, you know, for all the work you guys do. And I see more progression moving forward. I mean, now with that said, I don't know any wrestlers on these new teams, you know, but I did meet Corinth's coach the other day on the phone. We had a nice talk. He's a Tennessee guy. He was from Briarcrest. He moved down here. So and I'm bringing that up because I love, because unfortunately when you have a new program, it's either, hey, who here at the school wants to get an extra stipend, or you conveniently have a guy who moved here who wrestled in his past life. And,
right.
And so again, we have this dichotomy where it's just, you just have a guy running your program, or you have coincidentally have a good wrestler running your program. And so I'm glad to hear that Corinth got a wrestler to head their program. And also, and if you don't, they're usually within driving distance of a club that's usually ran by a wrestler.
Right.
Now, putting that aside, let's dive into the team. So let's name the first team and let's
All
chat
right,
about
let's
them.
go with Saltillo.
Saltillo. Shout out to Tony Beal. Coach Beal's doing good stuff over there. You know, I'm going to say this a lot, so bear with me, but Saltillo is one of those teams where, like, they could run the North. They really could. I mean, they have the bodies, they have the room, they have the interest, they have a nice club right there in Tupelo that they can go participate in. And so they have all the pieces to put together a good program. I think the culture is a little lacking, but that's not through a lack of effort on the coaching part. I think that's just something that we have to still instill on these kids. But with that said, and I know they have some good middle of the road kind of guys whose names I just can't think of right now, but you know, shout outs to Ace McCracken, Case Kincaid, Brandon Myhand, and Trip Nallen. Those 4 guys. Oh, and of course, Andre Neighbors. How could I forget you, my dude? Those guys are going to make some waves. You know, Brandon and Tripp are state finalists. Oh, and so was Case. All 3 of them were state finalists. Ace was a state finalist favorite. Unfortunately, he fell short in that opening round. But I would say Case, Ace, Brandon, and Tripp, all 4 of them could easily make the finals. I mean, I can't speak for Ace and Case, but I train Tripp and Brandon, and I know they put in the work this summer. I mean, you want to talk about committed athletes. Those two, I mean, they put in the work, and they deserve everything that's coming for them because they've grinded, they've traveled, they've sought competition out, and they're the archetypical example of kids who have bought in to what I've been trying to preach. So I expect good things for them. Case, same thing. I know he's done a lot of good training in his club, and I've loved watching him wrestle. He's just a natural athlete, and I think he'll do very well this season. And then Ace, he's a funky kid. He has this nice jiu-jitsu background, and I love watching him scramble. He just needs to tighten up that technique a little bit, and I don't see why he can't reach that next level. And then same with Andre. He's a kid who just tries his darndest, and he has everything there. Same with Ace. He just needs to polish a couple aspects of his technique, and he's going to reach that level too. And so if everything goes well, I think Saltillo will be in title contention, at least in the North half. They'll definitely have some North half champions and finalists, and so Saltillo is going to be tough this year in the North. Beyond that, who's to say? It's anyone's game. But I think if Saltillo really puts in that work and they get their act together, they're going to be a problem.
All right, man. Hey, we're looking forward to it. Saltillo, big things. All right, let's go Tupelo.
Tupelo, they have a coaching change this year. Our president, Brian Fox, he's stepping into that role, and I believe one of the club coaches there is also assisting with their efforts there. And so that's going to be interesting to see. I know Brian has a wrestling background himself. He's from the great state of Ohio, which a great wrestling state. And so I hope them the best. I don't know, again, too much about what his style is, and I've never rolled with him personally, but I think any kind of wrestling background's more than zero.
Right.
Now, as far as talent on that team, again, I'm not super familiar, but there's one kid who I admire immensely, who I wish I could coach. I wish he was on my team. And hey, if you ever want to train, this offer's there. But Clay Crane, that kid, he is. I think, without knowing any better, I think he seems like a kid who's like a coach's dream. He stays out of trouble. He's polite. He's nice, and his work ethic is what has gotten him to where he is right now. I don't think it's anything special from Tupelo or at the club he trains at. I think just his mentality and his desire to be good at this sport is what has gotten him from to he's probably average, which I mean that in the best as a compliment. For a guy who's only been wrestling for a couple of years to where I'd feel comfortable taking you around the country to wrestle, that's amazing. So shout out to his coaches and shout out to just his mentality and his work ethic. And he got third last year. And I don't see why he can't make the finals or win the whole thing. I mean, especially I saw him at the Millington Tri-State Tournament, and he's looking sharp. So I expect big things from him. And then Porter Vaughn is another kid from Tupelo. I haven't seen him. I was impressed with him a little bit last year's state tournament. I know he fell short in a couple matches, but he looked solid. I don't know what he's been up to this past summer, but he's a name that I think I expect something out of him. You know what I mean? So those two kids, unfortunately, those are the only two kids I can think of at Tupelo. I apologize to the other Tupelo kids, but you have two great leaders to emulate on that team, Porter and Clay, for sure.
All right, let's move on. Let's DeSoto Central.
DeSoto Central, man. I was listening to the Mississippi Wrestling podcast with Andy Warren and Tyler Knox, and they were saying that DeSoto Central was the dark horse team, and after training with them for a couple months now, I gotta admit, I think they might be spot on. They're a team that I think has the potential to surprise a lot of people. I've seen like I said, I train with these kids at the club up there, and I see what they're about, and they're hungry and they have a point to prove. And so there's a lot of names I could drop right now, but I want the community to find out for themselves. You know,
Well,
I do want to, you know.
I got one
Yeah,
that I know.
Yeah.
And that's because, all right, so Rex Forsyth.
Yeah.
Now, I saw him, you know, he did well in the state tournament last year. That's kind of where I saw him at a quad. I can't remember which quad it was. That was the first time I saw him, and I was like, man, like, who is this Brock Lesnar?
I know,
walking in, right? And then to come to find out the kid was like a freshman.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, Jesus. You know?
Dude bigger than me, ninth grade.
Because he was huge. Well, then, you know, I seen him at the state tournament. And then, you know, with the Slice Fight Network, you know, we cover like MMA shows.
Yeah.
On some of these MMA shows, you know, they'll bring in, you know, some jiu-jitsu or some wrestling or something. Well, it just so happens, I see Rex Forsyth at the weigh-ins. I'm like, hey, what's up, man? You know, and I did get an interview with him, and then he went out there, competed, and won, you know. And so I also got to see him wrestle in a cage.
Yeah.
So I know he's out there putting in extra work, you know.
Which, there are some names I am going to drop. Rex Forsyth is definitely one of them. I remember the first time I saw Rex was South Pontotoc was doing Starkville and DeSoto Central. And my boy, who we're going to talk about when South Pontotoc brings up, I was like, that's who you're going to, oh my God. Because, you know, at the time, Rex was like 240, just like you said, Brock Lesnar, just a monster looking dude. But the thing about Rex, and I'm basically going to repeat a lot of what I talked about with Clay Crane, is that kid, he is bought in, he is grinding hard, he's locked in, and that kid trains probably more than any other kid I've seen. He goes from wrestling, he goes from the gym to wrestling practice to jiu-jitsu, or wrestling, gym, jiu-jitsu. Like, he trains 3 times a day, dude, and he's improved immensely. And what I'm always in his ear right now, and what's cool is that, you know, he's a big boy, I'm a big boy, we can train together, and, you know, I've actually wrestled with him, and I see the potential. He has some hurdles he's still facing, but when we figure this puzzle out, he's going to be a problem. And he has a nice long time horizon. He's just a sophomore, and let me just say, he's leveled up since last year. And as soon as we polish his techniques, he is going to be a problem. I have all the faith in the world for Rex, and I'm looking forward to see how he does this season. And then the other person that I want to mention, actually there's 2 other kids I want to mention from DeSoto Central. Like I said, the rest I want to be secrets to let the community find out. But Ian Shepard's another kid. You know, I'm not going to, you know, no offense, buddy. You know, don't be mad at me when I see you at practice. But last year you were a little rough, a little spastic. He is another kid that's put in the work. I was so blown away the first time I saw him at 3C when I started going up there to train that he's tightened things up. And now he's a problem. I think he finished 6th or 7th last year. I think he could easily make the final. If everything goes right, he can make the finals this year. He's tightened up his technique. He's worked on his aggression. He's worked on his gas tank. I think he's another kid who's going to make some waves this season. And then lastly, Eric Swift. He's the returning finalist from DeSoto Central. He has a wrestling background himself. He comes from Virginia, where I think he placed 3rd his sophomore year. And like I said, he was runner-up last year in Mississippi. And so, same thing. He's put in the work. He's looking good in the room right now. He's 2 weeks into the season. He's looking solid. Same thing. I expect him to make the finals again this year. And so DeSoto Central, they have 3 killers that I'm willing to name drop right now, but there's at least 4 other kids that I think are going to make some waves. And you're going to know their names soon. Trust me.
All right, man. All right, let's get to North Pontotoc.
North Pontotoc. The first thing I want to say about North Pontotoc is like they're a team that has just consistently, you know, don't hate me for this, but they've just been a consistent letdown for me. They should have won state the last 3 years, but there was just a culture issue, in my opinion. And the reason why I'm going to say that is because I coached half their varsity roster. Like, I know what they're capable of doing. I know what they have done. I've taken them to tournaments. They've beaten incredibly talented kids, and to see their performance last year after Christmas was just, it broke my heart. I mean, but regardless, that team has a lot of talent, and I know they still have that potential still there. It's just a matter of, is the culture in their room correct? Do they have the right coaches? Are they putting in the right work? Do they have their heads on straight? And I hope they do, because I have a lot of love for those boys still. I mean, you know, once I've coached you, I still consider you one of my boys. And so, with that said, I mean, the Hale boys, I expect great things out of them. Luke, he has set the standard for a lot of the guys I coach. I mean, he's a hard worker. He's consistent. He's curious about wrestling. He's a natural, you know. And you know, we didn't quite meet our goals last year, but I think if he, like I said, if things just can get situated right, he has the potential to be a state champion. Same with his younger brother Carson, and now, God bless, Carson is taller than me now. He's starting to. He was an 8th grader last year. He's freshman this year. He's growing into his body. And the thing about brothers is that, you know, the older brother usually sets the standard, but then the younger brother usually exceeds that standard,
Right.
which is good.
That's supposed to happen, right?
It's supposed to happen, you know. And you see that all the time, where it's like, you know, if you're a wrestling fan, like the Stevenson brothers out of Apple Valley, Minnesota, the older Stevenson was a 2-time state champion. Gable Stevenson, 4-time state champion, 2-time NCAA champion, gold medalist. And so, I mean, usually when it comes to brothers, the younger one will excel. And so Carson's fortunate to have Luke as a brother, and they're training partners. And you know, I see the same thing in Carson that I see in Luke, and I don't see it, like I said, if he just puts in the effort, gets in the right room, he can be a state champion, he can be a college athlete, just like his brother. So the Hale boys, I expect big things out of them. Now, of course, I got to give a shout out to my boy Bates. That kid is a absolute animal for better or worse. You know, he's a firecracker. I mean, you know, he sorry, I got a bunch of nostalgia and memories going on in my head right now. What I will say about Bates is that kid is passionate, and he is a fighter, and he's going to go out there, and he's not going to stop until that last whistle blows, you know. And so he bought into that system where it's you fight from that first second to that last second, and he's had a lot of success just by following that program. And so Bates, the Hell Boys, Mike Wilbanks, I'm assuming he's got out for wrestling. I think he just has a lot of natural skill that he can do very well in this sport. Same thing, if he can just grind it out, buy into the system, buy into the process. Presley Thomas, another guy where it's just, his biggest issue was always consistency. If he would just stick with it, I think he could reach that certain level. And then let me think here. I really don't want to forget. I got the Hale Boys, I got Bates, I got Will Banks. Oh, I gotta give a shout out to my boy JD. You know, JD, he's a wonderful kid. He was their 190-pounder last year. He's a sweet boy, and he gives so much effort. He's another one of those kids where it's just like, it's unfortunate. He's junior high. He's in a grown man's weight class, but he's still a kid. And so he took a lot of lumps last year, but God bless, if he's not smiling through every little bit of it, if he's not at practice, I mean, you know, when I'm coaching and I talk about effort and like giving effort and giving everything you have, like he does. And so I got to give a shout out to him, just give him his props. I know we don't have the record that we probably want yet, but it's coming. He's going to be in ninth grade this year, and if he just sticks with it, he'll be just fine.
And that, you know, and that just will come with like the mental maturity, you know, coming up. And because, you know, like I said, you start out, sometimes you just got to be the nail for a little while before you get to be the hammer.
Yeah.
You know?
Which, so I got to digress for a second. So when I was growing up, I was always interested, because normally you just hear about 4-time state champions because you wrestle from 9th through 12th grade. But then there's these states like Minnesota or the Dakotas or New York where it's like, oh, you can start wrestling 7th, 8th grade. I always thought that was cool. Like Mark Hall out of Apple Valley, Minnesota, 6-time state champion. Oh, that's a really cool thing to say. And I was always kind of like jealous of that, where it's like, it would have been cool to be a part of that high school process in junior high.
Right.
I have completely changed my opinion about that since coaching in Mississippi. It is not cool to stick a 7th grade boy and put him up against a 12th grade man. Like, it is rough. And like with South Pontotoc, when I was coaching there, golly, we had a lot of 7th graders going up against some seniors, and there was a couple boys where it's like, he was walking off the mat, and I'm like, that boy's gonna quit. Like that boy, like, and to no fault of his own, like getting your shoulder torn up by a grown man at 7th grade, it's rough, dude.
Yeah.
So JD kind of falls in that category. He's still growing into his body. He's still figuring out that stuff. And like I said, that 190 weight class, usually that's like a junior, senior weight class. And so it just is what it is. But ultimately, on the other side of things, taking those lumps, being that nail, that does condition you for greater things later on, you know?
Right. All right, man. Let's get to my alma mater, South Pontotoc.
South Pontotoc. Again, we have a coaching change up there. I know Coach Luther's still there. Shout out to Luther. Coolest dude, great guy. I just can't say enough positive things about Luther. I know Shaw Pruitt left. He's at Mississippi School of Math and Science now. They have a team this year. I expect good things from him. He was a good athlete, and he's another kid where it's like if you can just tighten up your technique and slow things down and really kind of get your reps in, he has the potential to break that ceiling. And so I hope he can do that at Mississippi School of Math and Science. I hope he can be a standout athlete for their first year, because I know my first year I had him, I think we got a 500 record. We were one match shy of placing, and then this past year he got over that hump and he placed at state. So this year, I don't see why he can't continue that trend of success. So I'm expecting good things from Shaw Pruitt. And then, of course, the Holly boys. I mean, those two kids are near and dear to me. I'm going to start with Grayson Holly, the little one, little Holly. He, just like Bates, he's that kid where he's just going to fight you from that first second to that last second. He's a kid, Grayson, I use it as an example, buddy, and I've mentioned you at least 4 times in this new team I'm coaching, where it's like, I had this one kid, he bought in and he fought for every second, every square inch. He never gave opponent anything. And in fact, he won most of his matches in the third period, because my philosophy with coaching was we don't get tired, they get tired. And we're constant pressure, constant aggression. And so, and no offense, buddy, but he'd be getting his butt whooped those first 2 periods. The amount of matches I've seen that boy be losing between 6 to 8 points going into the third period to tie it, win it, or lose by a point, that's the majority of his matches.
Yeah.
And so it's just, he is, like I said, I use him as an example all the time of what I want to see in an athlete. I never have to question his effort because I can see it visually, him fighting every second. Same thing though, 7th, 8th grade. He's going to be 9th grade this year. He took a lot of lumps. He had a losing record 7th grade year. He had about a 500 record. Oh my God. Sorry, I got taken back to that match. He was 1 match away from placing. Literally 5 seconds to go. Oh my God. A lot of heartbreak moments in this sport, dude.
Yeah,
but
man.
This year, I mean, it's his 9th grade year, man. And so he has a long time horizon. I don't see why he can't do it this year. I mean, he was 1 match away last year, and he's had that consistent trend of improvement. So I expect him to do well this year, at least get on the podium. Now, that brings me to Big H, Braden Holly. He's, like I say, he's a wrestler who's near and dear to my heart. Another kid he's a coach's dream. He's a man of his word. He's consistent, hardworking. You tell him to do something, he doesn't question it. He just does it, and it shows in his wrestling. I know that first year I had him, I think we ended up placing 6th, and then that following year he placed 4th. And what's unfortunate is that he had shoulder surgery after state, because at state he messed up his shoulder, and he plowed through it. He soldiered up and he kept going, because it was the point where the trainer was like, well, it's not going to get any worse. So, well, then I'm going to wrestle.
Right.
And so like that's that warrior spirit.
Yeah, that mental toughness we talk about,
And he locked in, he wrestled his best, and like I said, he got on the podium that first year. Last year, we had a rough semi match, but then a heartbreak 3rd and 4th place match. But I don't see why he can't make it to the finals. He stays in good position. He doesn't get tired. He has a gas tank. He's strong as an ox. My God, he can pick me up over his head, dude. So, again, if he's just in that right culture, in that right room, if he's pushed hard enough, I don't see why he can't be a title contender this year. I've been saying it for months. I think Braden Holly can do a lot of really cool things this year, and he's another kid who I think could wrestle at the next level if he so chose to.
All right, man. Now, got one more of the North Half schools that I wanted to get to, French Camp.
French Camp. Again, I have to talk about French Camp because I have to give a shout out to Forrest. Us Iowa boys got to stick together. But, there's this one kid on that team who gave me a lot of headaches last year because with Big H. That's Hunter Bunton. That dude is a monster. I feel sorry for anybody that has to go out there and wrestle him. I mean, I think he's like, 6'4", 280, and so he's just...
Yeah, I saw him a couple times last year in that state. I was like, man, this is a big kid,
dude. Big boy,
this is a
dude.
big kid.
I know, dude. And he's a kid where it's just like, he already has the majority of the tools. Like, the nice thing about upper weights is that it's almost like a different style of wrestling. It's complex in its own way, but really when you start getting to that like 190, 215 heavyweight, if you can get a good shot, if you can stand up off the mat, and you can throw in a half, you can excel.
You can do a lot.
And so the only thing holding him back right now is just this confidence. And so just to relive Braden's season last year, Braden beat him the first time they met. Then I believe Braden beat him the second time they met. Then after that, Hunter was like, forget this. Like, I'm not going to lose this guy anymore. And he got this confidence. And once he got that confidence, he started getting Big Holly's number. And so I say that just to say, if that kid walks into every single match thinking, I'm that guy, I'm him, I'm going to dominate, I'm going to be aggressive, I'm going to club that head, I'm going to snap him down to the mat, he's going to win state, hands down. The only thing holding him back is himself. Because I've witnessed him numerous times destroying kids, and so if he can just get his head right, get that confidence, he can win state, and then he can get himself a college scholarship if he wants. I have no doubt in my mind about that.
Well, all right, man. Well, that's all that I have as far as like the schools and stuff that I want to go over. Now, talk to us a little bit about like you at North Pointe. Like, what's something that y'all have coming up in the season and stuff that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, so North Pointe is a unique case. It was a happy coincidence how I ended up there. I started working with Zach Lee over at Community Combat, and I was just going up there to just kind of get some wrestling in. I know he had some upper weights that wanted to kind of learn some wrestling, and some jiu-jitsu guys who wanted to kind of get better on their feet. And over time, and then I have my own kids down here who just needed bodies to train with, so I'd take them up to Community Combat to cross train. And over time, eventually, I just met Brad Branning, and he's a football coach / he's involved with North Pointe, and we started talking. He's like, you should help me run this program. So we talked to the AD, talked to the president, and now I'm their assistant coach. And it's been really cool because I've been able to this year I've been more hands-on with like the administrative stuff. I've had more control over when we practice, where we practice, what we go over in practice, competitions, and so I got to have my own input on where we should wrestle and when to wrestle. So that's been really fun, to finally get to that aspect of wrestling. I know I've made a lot of new friends this past week and a half, just kind of calling coaches and just kind of get the lay of the land, and so that's been really cool. But North Pointe's unique because they're a private school. They used to be in the Memphis area, but then they moved to Mississippi. And so they used to be in the Mississippi High School Athletic Association, but they're in the private school league, and most of the private schools are down south, and so that just cost them way too much money to travel constantly. So they petitioned to rejoin the Tennessee Athletic Association, to which they were approved. So even though they're located in Mississippi, they compete in Tennessee. Okay. And so that puts them in a unique situation. Yeah. And then unfortunately this year, I don't think I think they attempted to try and get involved with the postseason here in Mississippi. Unfortunately, the powers that be denied that application, but it is what it is. If anything, and honestly, as much as I would love to produce state medalists and champions this year, it gives me zero incentive to wrestle Mississippi teams. And so I was able to kind of play with our schedule to kind of put in Tennessee tournaments. And so one thing that I heard right away that was a non-negotiable between Brad and the other coaches I work with was the Black Horse tournament. It's put on at Germantown, Tennessee, from Houston High School. Shout out to Nelson. And I've never seen it, but everyone I talk to says that is the tournament in West Tennessee and probably this area. From what I hear is that it takes all the best wrestlers in Tennessee and the South, converge to this tournament, and they scrap, and it's a 2-day tournament. And they said, correct me if I'm wrong, audience at home, but I think it's like the de facto state tournament, where it's like, we have divisions, right? In Tennessee, it's a little extra weird where they have divisions, but they also have private public divisions, whereas like Black Horse, it's everyone in one bracket. Gotcha. And so it's like, if you win Black Horse, that might be better than a state title, depending on which division you land on, because you're beating other state champions to get that Black Horse tournament title. And so I have no delusions to think we're going to go up there and kick butt, but it's important to expose these kids to these types of tournaments, create these, first, to show them where the standard's at. Where it's like, I preach this thing, and you're only taking me at my word, so here, let me take you to a place, let me show you what that looks like in person. And that's what I loved about the first club season when it was here, is all these kids had these delusions of like how good they were, and oh, you know, states, here's this big deal. Well, here, let me take you to Alabama real quick, and let me show you what's up.
Yeah.
You know, and they've learned of what a good quality wrestler looks like. And so that's why, if you're a coach, you have to go out of state, especially if you are within an hour's drive to Memphis or North Alabama or Northeast Arkansas or Southeast Missouri. Go out of state, compete with the best. If you want to become a good program, you have to find good competition, make those relationships with coaches, and also it's a two-way street, because then you develop those relationships, and so when eventually Mississippi, and when we start throwing our own tournaments, they're going to want to come to ours as well. And that's crucial in developing our sport. Not only because expanding our network and getting these events larger, because again, we only have, in the entire North half, we have about 16 teams. Well, and it gets boring wrestling the same guys over and over again. So let's get these out-of-state schools to come to our tournaments, right?
That's right.
Let's increase the size of these tournaments, and let's expose us to different bodies. And then also, so not only is that going to create better wrestlers by exposing them to more elite talent, kind of motivating them to kind of set their standards a little higher, but it's also just going to grow our sport internally. You know, it's going to make our tournaments larger. It's going to get more eyes on us. You know, my favorite story in my coaching career so far here in Mississippi was my first year with Tanglefoot. We were blessed to be supported to go to the Alabama State games, and we walked in, and there's these coaches who are just like, Tanglefoot, like what was that? And I was like, oh, we're North Mississippi, and to no fault of their own, I'm from Iowa. I know how I felt about wrestlers from other states. But, they're like, oh, it's so good you're here. It's great that, you guys can just experience wrestling. And then some of our kids won it, And so at the start of the tournament, and again, there's no value judgment in me saying this, but at the start of the tournament, there's some condescension when I was communicating with coaches. By the end of the tournament, it's, hey, where are you located? Here's my number. Let's communicate. Let's link up sometime. Right. And that's important, because also it builds our confidence in our own athletes. Like, I've developed relationships with Millington Central up in Tennessee. And again, same thing happened. I took kids up there, and they're like, oh, it's so great. We can help you learn how to wrestle. But then, I had kids beating their kids. And before long, it's just like, well, dang, how long have these kids been wrestling? A year. Well, they just beat a state qualifier. And so it's like, and that makes our kids feel good.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
As they should.
And then, so again, it's all about, not only is it building confidence, setting the standard higher. I can't emphasize enough these relationships. Like, I had no idea when I met this Millington Central guy, and I convinced him to come to the Tanglefoot tournament during that first year. They had it over the summer. That I'd be traveling up to their high school to train in their room. That I'd be calling him like, hey, what kind of Tennessee tournaments you have? Oh, there's this Bartlett tournament after Christmas. Oh, well, hey, we're going to that. Like North Pointe's going to that for sure. That's where all the Tennessee teams are going. We're going to be there. And so that's when I said we're playing with my schedule, is I'm talking to these coaches. They're filling me in on what's going on. And so that's, if you're a coach and you want to give your kids, and so, sorry, I got to digress again. But a lot of these kids have a very limited time horizon for wrestling.
Right.
They only have 1 or 2 years, and most of them aren't going to wrestle college, even though I encourage all kids to consider it. A lot of them aren't. And so give them the best experience you can give them. And nothing's more fun than traveling with your boys.
That's true.
Road trips, baby. Let's go to Birmingham. Let's go to Memphis. Let's go to Little Rock, Arkansas. Let's go to Louisiana. Let's go to Florida. And that's something I admire. And again, I'm not trying to blow smoke up their butt, but the Southern teams, they've figured it out already. Sutherland and Snow and Truckner, they've already figured it out. You got to go to Louisiana. You got to go to Florida. You got to go to Alabama. And that's how we're going to get better. And they're the dominant teams.
Yeah.
Well, Van Cleve, Ocean Springs, they're killing it. And part of that is because they know in order to get better, they have to compete with the best.
Right.
And so
you got to go find better competition.
Exactly. So when designing this North Pointe schedule, I know we're a first-year team, and we're going to be green, and we're going to take a lot of licks, but I'm creating a pathway forward.
Planting the seed.
Exactly.
You gotta plant the seed before you can.
You do. And so, you got to think long term. And so, I think by going to these tournaments, seeking out this competition, it gives someone to strive for, and it gets kids exposed. And now I'm kind of beating a dead horse now, but so you get what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, man, I really appreciate your time coming through today, doing this preseason podcast, letting us know about you. Is there anything else you want to let anybody know?
Oh man, like I said, it's wrestling, dude. I could talk forever. There's probably something I could talk about, but maybe future episodes, maybe future time. I'm very grateful that you gave me the opportunity to sit down and talk. I want to just directly talk to any coaches or wrestlers that are watching or listening to this. I know we're in season, and so, we have rules. We can't cross-train necessarily or, get together and try and work and collaborate. But, looking ahead to the off-season, my biggest thing is our mission is to grow Mississippi wrestling. And I'm going to say something a little controversial here, is that there's no sense in really trying to fight over Mississippi titles and who's the best in Mississippi, because in a grander scheme of things, it really doesn't matter. I know we have a lot of kids going off to college right now, and there's probably kids in Van Cleve at Marion University that are saying, when they talk to their kids, their teammates about their wrestling experience, they're not Van Cleve, they're Mississippi. You know what I'm saying? Like, when we sent kids to Virginia Beach or Deep South Duels, they're not North Pontotoc or Ocean Springs, they're Mississippi. And so our vision should be creating a good wrestling state, not good wrestling teams, if you're following what I'm saying. And so in order to do that, we need collective action. We need to work together. We need to build each other up. We shouldn't stonewall each other. We shouldn't spread rumors. We shouldn't try and undercut one another. We need to be humble and kind of be open to other people's experiences and expertise. And then most importantly, when it comes to the off season, we need to get together in the rooms, man. There's no sense of being like, you can't come train here, or yeah, you can come train here, but it's going to cost you $15 a wrestler. That's insanity to try and create these barriers to increase the quality of our wrestlers. Because another thing is, in order to grow wrestling, and this is just one of many things that's going to help grow wrestling, so don't think this is the only thing. No one wants to be a part of a team that's not good. So if you're, it's like, hey, join wrestling. We're 0-13. We lost every single duel last year. You should join. Like, no one's going to want to do that, man. And so another thing that's going to make this sport attractive is success, especially with schools. You want your school to start a program, or you want your school to start investing in your program. You want to start winning some titles. You want to start winning some tournaments. You want to start winning some matches. You want to get people excited about it. And so by limiting your competition, or if you're limiting exposure to workout partners or other coaches, or if you're trying to, be the king of the sandcastles that we're building here, I mean, you're just going to hinder our development. And so if our mission is to create a quality wrestling state, well, then we need to work together, guys. And so I've tried my absolute best. I've been on the phone with a lot of coaches. And there's some coaches that you already know. I was calling, like I said, that's how I met Zach Lee. Hey, can I come up there and bring some guys and wrestle? That's how the Millington Central guy, hey, I got some guys. Can I come up there and wrestle? And so cross-training is such an important thing. Like, I know we have our home clubs, and I know we have our home guys, but it's so important that we stop thinking about this as like a zero-sum game and realize that this is a collective action game. And so I'm hoping that the future of Mississippi, we see more cross-training and more cooperation and more assistance with each other. And I think through that, we're going to see some greater results, for sure.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I think that was very well said. And just to kind of, wrap it up here, I would like to make an announcement.
Oh yeah, we got exciting news, yeah.
Yeah, we have some exciting news for you, ladies and gentlemen, wrestling fans of Mississippi. On November 16th, the North Pontotoc Duels, we're going to make the initial appearance of the Mississippi Wrestling Network. That'll be me and Ty Nolan on the commentary. We'll have a production team with us, and you'll be seeing us throughout the year. Weekly, we'll have a podcast. We're going to be looking into setting up, a call-in line. So if you want to tune in, you can call in, ask questions, anything throughout the week that happens. We'll bring you a recap of wrestling that week, what we reflected on from the week, what we'll be looking forward to the next week. We'll be covering your North Half state tournaments. But the big thing is we want to develop a platform for wrestlers, right? We want to grow. This is going to be our contribution to growing Mississippi wrestling with exposure. That's why I started the Slice Fight Network. It's for the same reason with fighters from Mississippi. I've believed for a long time we've had some of the best fighters in the world, not just in the country, in the world, from Mississippi, but there wasn't a platform. Now, we're developing wrestlers, and I think we have a lot of potential to, have some of the best wrestlers in the country, within time in the state of Mississippi. But a huge part of that is a platform, and so that's what we're going to be here to provide you. So stay tuned. We're going to have Facebook, YouTube, all that, and so make sure when you see that drop, you go, you follow and subscribe, and that's where our, we'll cover the live duels, the live, quads, all that will be there. So make sure you go and give that a follow once you see that drop. Stay tuned for that. Joel, appreciate your time today, brother.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you much.
You.
I'm excited for the future, dude.
All right, best of luck this year.
Thank you, sir.
See y'all.